Michael Saylor just confirmed he's going to be selling $5 billion worth of Bitcoin, and the internet has gone into an absolute frenzy this morning. Forbes is sending massive warnings, and that's because $5 billion worth of Bitcoin, this is nearly 10% of all of the Bitcoin that MicroStrategy holds. They're the largest holder, and people are now starting to predict that this could trigger a little bit of a Bitcoin death spiral. But Michael is not one of those people. Listening to what he said about what really influences the Bitcoin price in this little clip I've got for you guys here.
We're going to bring $30 billion to the market in one afternoon, maybe, but I have spent lots of driver of Bitcoin. I can tell you for a fact, for example, we bought $100 million of Bitcoin an hour. It doesn't move the price. We bought $200 million of Bitcoin an hour. It doesn't move the price. We have bought $200 million of Bitcoin an hour or $300 million in an hour and stopped. The price goes up. Okay, so for anyone that thinks that they have enough power, well, maybe if you're going to bring $30 billion to the market in one afternoon, maybe, but I have spent lots of money. We bought more Bitcoin than anybody that I know of. I think we probably acquired $62 billion of Bitcoin. What I believe is that it's a global market. It's got dynamics all its own. It's driven by foreign policy, and if the Chinese government has a certain announcement, that drives the price of Bitcoin. And so it's flattering to suggest that we're that systemically important. I don't think so.
Why is it?
So the big news is Michael Saylor doesn't think that him selling Bitcoin affects the price, even if they're buying hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin per hour. Apparently, it doesn't. Today, I kind of want to investigate what might happen to the price of Bitcoin if MicroStrategy were to be forced to sell $5 billion worth of their Bitcoin. And I want to look at why this might accelerate a death spiral in the Bitcoin space, because you can't really analyze this Michael Saylor story and headline in and of itself unless you're aware of what has been happening over the past couple of weeks. We've got some of the biggest Bitcoin treasury companies in the world collapsing and dumping their coins. Again, last week, we saw two of the largest Bitcoin treasury companies in the UK pretty much sell all of their Bitcoin. And then we have other companies experiencing, let's call it leadership change. At 21, we saw Jack Mallers resign as the CEO. We're watching Bitcoin miners puke their coins. And this has all kind of happened in the weeks after Michael sold, was it about $200 million worth of Bitcoin? What if he sold 10 times that? What if he sold 20 times that? 5 billion? This is the question I want to kind of explore today with you guys. This is the holdings of Bitcoin by strategy. This is their official company website. You can see they hold $52.9 billion worth of Bitcoin. But the interesting part of this is they haven't bought in 47 days, if my maths is correct. Their last buy was on June 22nd. So they didn't buy any Bitcoin in July. So that's about 5 to 6 weeks that we've seen zero buying coming from strategy. This is, again, very interesting to be aware of. Now, I want to take you to the source. I want to show you where all of the hysteria seemed to come from today. Because what's interesting is these rumors were being spread today. But as you can see by Michael's official Twitter account, he had to kind of set the record straight. We can see right here, he replied to a tweet on Twitter. Still crazy that the news cycle lives on Twitter. We can see Michael said, this is August 1st, 1:55. This is 2 hours ago. He said, old news presented as new. Strategy announced their authorization on June 29th as part of its capital management framework. It permits but does not require Bitcoin sales for stated purposes. So he said there is no new announcement. He says we still expect to be a net buyer of Bitcoin over time, but he also said the news is not fake. It was news. Nobody paid attention to it though. And that's the really interesting piece of information that I think is going missed. And the question I want to ask you guys right now is, why is this news being circulated now in the middle of what is a little bit of a crisis in the Bitcoin space? For those who have been offline, the largest Bitcoin hardware wallet, I think largest is probably the wrong word. I would say probably one of the most popular Bitcoin hardware wallets was obviously hacked, and many users had their funds offline drained over the past 24 to 48 hours. And I'm really surprised that this announcement from Michael kind of got resurfaced now. Again, that's a question I just want to, for you guys to keep in the back of your mind. Why are we seeing all of this pop up now? Michael said that they announced this on June 29th, which would explain why we haven't really seen any buying come in from strategy since that new announcement that they laid out. You can see it. There is no orange dots in the month of July. Maybe we'll get one on Monday. Maybe we'll break a 5-week streak of no buy pressure coming from strategy. I don't know. This is all just speculation, but I just find it interesting that during one of Bitcoin's biggest hacks, for those unaware, we've seen $71 million worth of Bitcoin drained from the Cold Card hardware wallet. This is a website that tracks how much Bitcoin has been drained. You can see we're at 1,128 coins. We can see that this accounts to be worth somewhere around $71 million. And this is where I kind of want to plant a seed in your mind for a moment. This hack happened on July 31st. And I'm just going to show you some things that I saw. I saw Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on July 30th write this tweet urging that the Clarity Act is passed. You can see he says it's been more than a year since the House passed the Clarity Act. And look at what he says at the bottom of this tweet. America will lead or America won't. It's not more complicated than that. And we can see, if you don't believe me or don't get it, I don't have time to convince you. Sorry. I believe Satoshi once said it best. So you've got Treasury Secretary referencing Satoshi Nakamoto on July 30th. That's kind of super interesting. This is the same Treasury Secretary who earlier on in the year published this 34-page report that mentions digital IDs 75 times. And it also encourages Congress to pass something called a hold law, which would give exchanges the ability to freeze Bitcoin or any digital asset if it is suspected of illicit activity. So you don't need to actually do anything wrong, but if you are suspected of illicit activity, US Treasury is urging Congress to enact this law right here. You can see it, hold law. So this is the same Scott Bessent. He's praising Satoshi in a tweet. And then in a report, he's saying, hey, we love these digital IDs. We also want a hold law. And I raise this because this hack that we've seen affect Cold Card, we've actually seen somewhere between 10 and 20,000 Bitcoin sent from Cold Cards to exchanges. Now, I think you guys can see where I might be trying to connect dots. Maybe they're not there. I'm just showing you the facts and reality. But right now, we are facing a clarity deadline. Clarity Act could be passed in the next coming days. As Scott Bessent said, we've been waiting for a year for Clarity Act to pass. Deadline's approaching. We see 10 or 20,000 Bitcoin held by some of the most ideologically hardcore Bitcoiners get sent to exchanges. And this is happening 2 weeks before Bitcoin might see a fork for the first time in 9 years. That is because the BIP 110 soft fork proposal, the temporary soft fork proposal, that's coming up in less than 2 weeks. So again, I don't want you guys to take any of what I'm saying as FUD. I'm just saying there's kind of this weird correlation of events that's been happening in the past week. I also don't forget for a moment, BlackRock and all of the Wall Street banks threw their support behind the Clarity Act last Wednesday and Thursday. Think about that for a moment. BlackRock's been pretty quiet on the Clarity Act for the past year, and they throw their support behind it on Wednesday. All of the other banks follow on Thursday, including JP Morgan. And then we see Bitcoin's biggest hardware wallet hack ever. And by the way, this exploit in the cold card wallet, it's been there for 5 years, since 2021. Is it just a coincidence that this exploit was found less than 2 weeks before a potential fork in the Bitcoin chain? That's not something I want to explore today. I might actually explore that in a deep dive tomorrow. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you do want to see whether these dots connect or whether they don't. I want to talk a little bit more about Michael Saylor because I want to kind of zoom out for a minute. It's very easy to get lost in the source. $5 billion. It's a huge number. Okay, I get that. That would represent, what's that, somewhere around 8,000 to 9,000 Bitcoin being dumped on the market. Is that right or is that wrong? I'm going to do the maths in a moment, but I want to first zoom out because I want to also show you the bull case. Let's not forget Michael has bought hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin in 2026. And let's not forget, I think from a big picture standpoint, him floating the idea of potentially selling some Bitcoin, let's not conflate or lose sight of what he has said previously about Bitcoin. Okay, he has said, and he's been very loud about the fact that he wants to buy 1 million coins. He wants to buy even more Bitcoin than that. I've got a clip that I want to show you that I think is super interesting, but I'm getting a little notification that maybe my Twitter part of the stream is having some issues. If you are on Twitter, I preemptively put a link to the YouTube live stream in the comment section underneath that Twitter stream. So if I lose access to this as I try to refresh it, come and join us on YouTube and we'll continue this stream. This is strange. I don't normally get that notification. Apologies to anybody who is on Twitter and having those issues. Now, Michael, big picture. Let's zoom out for a moment so we don't get lost in the source. Because I want to, again, I don't want to just present this as FUD. Michael has said that we will be a net buyer of Bitcoin. And even if we sell $1 of Bitcoin, we want to buy $20 of Bitcoin. So think about that. If he's selling $5 billion of Bitcoin potentially, does that mean he's got a plan to buy $100 billion worth of Bitcoin and double the stack that strategy currently has? I think that would be really interesting. And to kind of build off of that, let's not forget there's not that much Bitcoin available to buy. Let's not forget that. I want to play this clip from Michael that I think is a really interesting one because this kind of, again, when we're thinking big picture, this will, I hope, inform you of the importance and the unique opportunity that there is for a Saylor or a nation state like America or China or Venezuela or Iran to potentially stack 1 million Bitcoin. Let me play this clip.
There's only room for one nation state to buy up 20% of the network. And obviously, I think it should be the United States. I think it will be the United States. It's a way for us to enrich ourselves and emerge as a creditor nation in a matter of a decade. It's also a way for us to ensure that we're the economic leaders in cyberspace and the digital economy for the next 100 years. And if we do that, every one of our allies will follow us, and then all of our enemies will end up having to buy into the network once it passes 10 or 20 million a coin, and they will enrich us.
So I think if we start to zoom out here and think from big picture, I think it's easy to get lost in short-term announcements, short-term FUD, short-term noise, especially when it's most bearish as it is right now. I think let's not forget, Strategy has 843,000 Bitcoin. This is a $53 billion Bitcoin war chest. And you've got to really ask yourself the question. That's 4% of the Bitcoin supply. It's just a tad over 4% of the Bitcoin supply. What happens if he gets to, what happens if they get to 5? What happens if they get to 6? What happens if they get to 7% of the Bitcoin supply? Well, in that clip we played earlier, let's not forget there is only room for 1, 2, 3 really large entities to get a stack of Bitcoin bigger than Michael Saylor's stack. That's because there is just not that much Bitcoin available on exchanges to buy. This is a 3-year chart of the number of Bitcoin on exchanges. And what do you see? It is very clear. The trend is your friend. There is less and less Bitcoin available to buy. This chart shows that there's about 500,000 to 600,000 Bitcoin have left the spot exchanges just in the past 3 years. Think about that, 500,000 to 600,000. Based on the data that you get your hands on, it's very tough to get good data looking at the available supply on exchanges, which is interesting. But the number fluctuates between 2 million and 2.7 million coins sat on exchanges. Strategy owns 800,000. There's only room for 3 strategies to enter the market. Think about that for a moment. If you're a nation state, you're probably going to want more Bitcoin than a public company. And that is where the game theory of all of this gets really interesting. We're seeing, I think what we're seeing is something super interesting as well. If you put do I want to put the tinfoil hat on? Let's put the tinfoil hat on. So we know that there is, let me show you what I think was super interesting. What do you notice in the biggest Bitcoin treasury companies? So Adam Back was supposed to have a treasury company. From memory, I don't remember the exact number of Bitcoin they were going to launch with, but it was tens of thousands of coins. That's kind of like being put on hold and it's never came to fruition. The same thing with 21 Capital, with the company that is now CEO'd by Rafa. They were last year supposed to have the plans of rivaling Saylor. We haven't seen them buy any more Bitcoin yet. And then think about all of the other biggest holders. Marathon, Bitcoin mining company, they've been selling Bitcoin. And then think about the trend that we've been seeing over the past 6 months. All of the smaller players have been selling their Bitcoin. They've been dumping their bags. So what is this creating? Big picture. This is creating a consolidation. This is meaning that Strategy is the only player in town. You can see if I zoom in on this, we can see Strategy's got 843,000 coins. The second best, 21 Capital, 43,000. There's a big gap there. You've got Metaplanet at 43,000, and then you've got Marathon at 36. And a lot of these other companies, they're not, I mean, Strive is doing a little bit of buying, but if you kind of zoom out here, a lot of these other companies are dumping Bitcoin. Marathon went from holding 53,000 to 36. They sold about 25 to 30% of their stack. What I just want you to keep in the back of your mind is as we see all of these smaller treasury companies capitulate and sell, don't lose sight of the bigger picture here. Strategy might have sold $200 million of Bitcoin recently, but that's like 0.01% of their total stack. They are becoming an increasingly larger chunk of the Bitcoin holders in the treasury company space. They are getting a bigger and bigger monopoly. Even if they haven't bought Bitcoin over the past 5 weeks, I find it very interesting that yes, there's news of maybe we'll sell $5 billion of Bitcoin, but I think that headline can be very easily glossed over. I think it can be very easy to get lost in the source. One of the only companies buying is Strive, as web dev newbie in the chat lays out. And I think this consolidation, if you start thinking about which governments might want to get their hands on some Bitcoin, it starts to make a little bit more sense that you've got strategy with the amount of Bitcoin that they have, and it's looking as if it's becoming more difficult for the rest of the players in the game to increase their holdings for whatever reasons you want to attribute that to. I don't want to get into full, tinfoil hat region for now. You know what? I will just read Stumpy's comment. Let's be honest. If the US government was directly buying sats, 1 million Bitcoin is a lot to grab, and nobody likes government. The open market would demand $1 billion per coin if it was going to the government. And that is a really interesting point. If a government wanted to buy 1 million Bitcoin, you would create a lot of slippage. You would probably create a lot of nation state FOMO, and you would create some really interesting things. While I'm talking about this, I might also give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek to another deep dive I've been looking at. We've kind of talked a little bit about the US Treasury and their interesting moves more recently. Let's not forget what they did just a couple of days ago to Iran. They've sanctioned Iran, and they've explicitly named Bitcoin. They said Iran will not accept Bitcoin for payment for ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, I don't want to give away what I've been cooking. Again, subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified for when I drop my next deep dive video on this topic. But I think there's something happening here. And another interesting thing that caught my eye on Michael's Twitter account in particular is this. I want to... wrong screen. Let me see whether I can find Michael's Twitter account. Again, everybody is talking about this hack right now and how $71 million worth of Bitcoin has been drained and sent to the exchanges. Some of the most hardcore, ideologically strong-minded Bitcoiners right now are selling their Bitcoin and putting it on a centralized exchange days before the Clarity Act is due to reach a deadline. Just think about that for a moment. And I'm going to be careful with what I say here. I do find it interesting that Michael is, if you look at his Twitter account, I thought maybe he might have tweeted something about that. But if you look at what he's been talking about today, he's been very interested with BIP 110. Have a look at this, for example. He's posted 2 separate threads today on Twitter. 3 hours ago, he posted this, talking about BIP 110. Less than 1% of Bitcoin's economic weight has adopted BIP 110. The claim that 16 to 18% of the nodes are supporting BIP 110 confuses software distribution and economic consensus. Bitcoin is not one node, one vote. Translation: he who holds the most Bitcoin and the economic weight matters most. That's what Michael is trying to convey with this tweet. And for me, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way that during one of Bitcoin's biggest misfortunate events with self-custody, happening to a lot of very ideologically minded hardcore Bitcoiners who believe Bitcoin is money, not JPEGs, Michael's taking the time to write 2 threads. You can see 3 hours ago. This is a thread. And then earlier this morning, 8 hours ago, he's writing another thread about BIP 110. At block 600, at block 960,000, BIP 110 only has 24 signals, 2.5% of the mining power back in it. Now, look, I've kind of sat on the fence about this debate, but I will highlight things that just smell a little bit funny when I see them. And these things are certainly eyebrow raising to me. That's what I will say on that topic, what I will continue to say on this topic, is it is absolutely tragic that people are having their cold wallets hacked and they're having their life savings drained from their hardware wallets. I'm going to say something that we've said on this channel for the past 6 years. You need to have an array of different setups. You cannot have one single point of failure. These stories of people having their entire life savings on a hardware wallet and having those funds drained is absolutely tragic. Again, what if we preach on this channel? Hold your own keys in a wallet, but learn how to use all sorts of other wallets. Learn how to set up a passphrase. I was lucky that I wasn't affected because I had the Mark III, the targeted, the most exploited version of the cold card hardware wallet. I had a significant chunk of Bitcoin on one of these, but I was safe because I had a passphrase. I also have multi-signature setups, okay? Again, this is something that is absolutely, as Hodl them Sat said in the chat, is the way to go. Okay. Again, while we're talking about strategy and IBIT, as we're about to be talking about, let's be very real here. I don't think this hack completely destroys Bitcoin self-custody. Right now, a little bit over 1,000 Bitcoin have been drained. But again, I always encourage you guys to zoom out. I know it's very scary right now. I know people are being scared away from self-custody because 1,000 Bitcoin has been drained from one of the most reputable hardware wallets in the space. But how many Bitcoin have been lost from centralized exchanges collapsing? FTX was supposed to have 80,000 Bitcoin in 2022 when they collapsed. 80,000. Mt. Gox, I forget the exact number, but it was more than 100,000 Bitcoin lost. And this was people who were trusting centralized exchanges. Right now, we're seeing 10 or 20,000 Bitcoin flow into exchanges. I hope this is just temporary. And I hope this does not scare people away from holding their own keys. Okay. Again, I think an absolute no-brainer when it comes to self-custody is getting a setup that works for you. I know that multi-sig can be a little bit intimidating. It can be a little bit scary for some people. This is why I've partnered with Bitkey this year. They make multi-sig easy by default. You buy a Bitkey, you hold a key with the Bitkey hardware wallet. Your phone turns into another key in minutes with Bitkey, and Bitkey holds another. Again, if you are looking for somewhere to migrate some funds to, I think Bitkey is a great option. I literally moved some of my funds from my cold card to my Bitkey. I use them. They're a no-brainer product. They're a really great product. You can get 10% off if you use the link down below in the description. Actually, if you use the promo code Luke, you might get a 15% discount because they're actually running what looks to be an even bigger sale right now during this Bitcoin self-custody crisis. Again, this is non-negotiable. We are learning very quickly the importance of having a secure Bitcoin setup. Go and take advantage of self-custody right now while you can. Okay, the Bitkey is a great option to set up multi-signature setups. If you want to set up a multi-sig where you hold all three keys, I've been preaching and recommending you guys investigate BitVault for a year now. Again, a lot of people have said, Luke, multi-sig, I don't need it. It's too complicated. Look what's happened. People trusting single sig have just got screwed. Again, BitVault, they're an application you can download on your phone, and it helps you set up a multi-sig wallet or a time-locked Bitcoin wallet in minutes. Again, it's a no-brainer. There's a reason I recommend them. You can get a 10% off your subscription if you use the link down below in the description. Go and check it out. People are getting knocks on the door in the UK. We've talked a little bit about Michael. And I thought that was important to do, considering what is happening right now. Something else I will mention before we completely pivot is Michael is very close friends with the Trumps. Just think about that for a moment. For anyone who doesn't believe that, I'll show you the source. I believe Michael's been at Mar-a-Lago on multiple occasions, at least once. Here's the receipts for those who didn't know that or don't believe that. Don't you think that's kind of interesting? If anybody knows anything about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or maybe America quietly buying Bitcoin to fill up its strategic Bitcoin reserve in the background, maybe it's Michael. Just an interesting tidbit for those who did not know that. I think it is very interesting. I think it's something that very commonly, very routinely gets missed. Because again, there is websites that track the public holdings of governments. Let's actually take you to this website. Publicly, governments hold 649,000 Bitcoin. Let me zoom in on that. But privately, unofficially, how much do they hold? Honestly, we have absolutely no idea. This is a source here. You can see America is there with 328,000 Bitcoin now. That's interesting. That has updated. Then we've got the UK, 61,000 Bitcoin. Interesting. Venezuela, how many Bitcoin? 240. That's the big picture here. Big picture, Michael holds 4% of the Bitcoin supply. There's not a lot of room for another entity to swoop in and buy 1 million coins. And here's the framing that I think is interesting. They don't want Bitcoin competing with the petrodollar. Again, this is another piece of information that commonly gets missed. Like what's happened in the Middle East, this is a battle over the petrodollar. This is a battle over what do you price oil in. The US Treasury sanctioned Iran for trying to let ships go through the Strait of Hormuz with Bitcoin. What I'll remind you guys about Michael's strategy that's at least good to be aware of is the first time he sold Bitcoin was in 2022, right at the bottom. Like it marked the bottom. So I don't want anybody thinking, oh my God, the biggest holder of Bitcoin is talking about selling $5 billion. It's all over. It's going to zero. This is generally the type of news and events that you see in a bear market. Eventually, you run out of sellers. And this was the point I tried to make in a recent video for you guys. Look at the news cycle. We've got Clarity Act being stalled and delayed. All of these Bitcoin treasury companies are selling and folding up. You've got all of these Bitcoin mining companies selling their Bitcoin and pivoting to AI. The largest holder of Bitcoin hasn't bought in 5 weeks. You've got bond markets blowing up. You've got South Korean stock markets losing 40% of its value in 40 days as this kind of AI bubble looks to be unwinding in the short term. And if you look at what Bitcoin's, and even today, for example, we've seen $71 million of funds stolen from what has been a very popular Bitcoin hardware wallet. And if you look at what price has done in the past 2 months, I'm surprised we're not lower. Again, we're not a short-term Bitcoin price prediction channel. Nobody knows where the price is going in the short term. But I find that super interesting that, okay, maybe the chart looks a little bit ugly in the short term. It does. But largely, over the past 3 months, we've just kind of chopped sideways between 58 and 65. That's kind of interesting to me as we're seeing all of this carnage unfold. Again, if we see more carnage, I'm just going to buy more Bitcoin. It's as simple as that. I'm not scared. My long-term thesis remains as bullish as it has always been. I'm going to continue improving my Bitcoin setup. Again, something else that's kind of interesting to note, if you are scared of Bitcoin self-custody, there's a reason why I've been partners with the Bitcoin Way. They can help you take self-custody of your Bitcoin. They can help you secure your cold card. You can see at the very top of their website right now, secure your cold card wallet, book a call now. They are all hands on deck helping people migrate their funds out of a cold card into a more secure setup. Again, book a free 30-minute call with my friends at the Bitcoin Way with the link down below in the description. And while we're talking about setting up multi-signature setups, again, I did mention BitVault, but Stampseed is also running a special sale right now where they're offering 21% off all of their products if you do want to get some metal plate backups for your new Bitcoin multi-sig setup, which I highly recommend you all to do today. Again, there's a link down below in the description. And people like to overcomplicate multi-sig, but this is as simple as it can be. You have 3 hardware wallets. Again, I won't be using a cold card in my multi-sig wallet. These are demonstrative wallets right now. You have 3 hardware wallets. Each one has a titanium plate. That's multi-sig. It's really not as complicated as most people think. And the software today makes setting one up a 5 to 10 minute job. You plug your 3 wallets into the laptop, you press key 1, key 2, key 3. It's not some cypherpunk complicated system. So again, if you do want to get a 21% discount on your 3 metal plates and a stamping kit, Stampseed is running that special sale right now to help people migrate from single sig wallets to multi-sig setups. And there is no excuse why you should not have all of your keys backed up with titanium. You can get a basic kit for like $110 once you apply that 21% discount that they are running right now with the link down below in the description. Go take advantage of it. Again, your Bitcoin generational wealth is only as generational wealthy as the security setup that you have. Sadly, a lot of people have learned that lesson. If you're not diversified, you're in big trouble. I saw a couple of comments. I'm trying to catch up on all the comments, but sometimes that's just impossible. I've seen a lot of comments recognize that. And again, this is why we keep saying, do not put all of your eggs in one basket. I think that's actually been one of the biggest lessons or the takeaways that I've seen being talked about this week during this whole cold card hack, which, by the way, did see it saw another big attack of funds today, I believe. We can see this website's super cool. It was just vibe coded, looking at the cold cards situation. At the bottom here, it has a little timer. Time since coin's last move, 2 hours ago. So there's another big wave of attacks 2 hours ago. This is 17 blocks ago. So again, it's happening. If you know anyone who has a cold card, reach out. Help them move their Bitcoin off that cold card. Well, who remembers the peak fear? All the fear around Stretch in June when it went all the way to $72 a share. Who remembers people saying, oh, this is a death spiral, it's all over, Bitcoin's going to collapse, Stretch is going to collapse, MicroStrategy is going to collapse. I don't know about you guys, but Stretch kind of looks like it's at $91 a share. That's what I will say. They look as if maybe they're going to rally a little bit harder. these are the type of indicators that I think is interesting. Don't listen to the fear and the fuzz. Self-custody is not over. Self-custody is not dead. 1,000 Bitcoin have been stolen. It is horrible. Don't get me wrong. But we've lost hundreds of times more Bitcoin by trusting centralized custodians. FTX was 80,000 Bitcoin alone. Do the maths. Add up how much was lost between BlockFi and Celsius. And how much dollars was lost in the Terra Luna collapse. I think at its peak, Terra Luna and Luna was worth like $50 billion at its peak. It's insane. It's insane that people are saying self-custody Bitcoin is dead. To answer the most recent comment in the chat, Michael said it himself. He might liquidate $5 billion of Bitcoin. That's what we discussed at the beginning of the stream. If Bitcoin goes lower, I'm just going to buy some more Bitcoin. It's as simple as that. I don't mind buying more. I think everybody should be using this bear market as an opportunity to increase their Bitcoin position. The worst thing you can do, go and talk to anyone who sold their Bitcoin in 2022 when it was at $20,000 a coin. All of those people regret selling their Bitcoin. Every single one of them. Now is not the time to be a net seller of Bitcoin. You always get this negative news cycle when Bitcoin's in a bear market. If we go lower, I'm going to borrow against my Bitcoin. I'm going to buy more Bitcoin. Okay? Again, you guys know I use the Ledn to borrow against my Bitcoin. They're the industry leader. They've processed $11 billion worth of loans, and they've got the cheapest rates in the space. They're an absolute no-brainer. As I've continued to say on this channel, you can get a discount on the fees on your first loan if you use the link down below in the description. And like we keep saying, and what's the big takeaway from today? Never put all of your eggs in one basket. Some of my eggs are in the Ledn basket, but I have a lot more eggs in my self-custody offline basket. I think I saw an interesting comment here as well. Strategy will reach $500 when Bitcoin hits $150,000. It's interesting. Strategy is under 100 today, by the way. So for me, my thoughts on the 4-year cycle, it's already broke. It's done. It's finished. It broke in 2024. Again, let me find the tweet so I can back up that claim. Did I knock my mic off, or are we still cracking? So I always refer to this tweet. I'm going to find it on my phone. I'm going to send it to myself. It's the quickest way for me to show you. But who remembers what happened in 2024 that we'd never seen before? What happened? Bitcoin hit a new all-time high before the halving of 2024. Now, what's so special about that? That's never supposed to happen based on the 4-year cycle. All of the biggest proponents of the 4-year cycle, they were telling us for years, don't buy Bitcoin in its halving year. Bitcoin only enters a bull market after the halving. And I've got the receipts to show that. Let me show you the receipts right now. Because who is the biggest proponent of the 4-year cycle? It's Ben Cohen. He's got 1 million followers on Twitter. Just look at what he was saying in 2024. He was saying, don't buy Bitcoin. When we were under $20,000 in 2022, he was predicting $13,000 Bitcoin. Look at this. I've got the tweets. I've got the receipts. On the 22nd of August, 2023, Bitcoin had already rallied from 16,000 to 28,000. We were about to enter 2024, and he said a case could be made for a double bottom. but be ready for $13,000 to $14,000 Bitcoin. The reason he was bearish all 2023 and 2024 was because he was convinced Bitcoin only rallies in the years after the halving. So my thoughts on the 4-year cycle, to answer the comment, it died. It's finished. It's already over. So that's my way of saying I have no idea what's going to happen next. I'm leaning more towards the bullish side. But again, if you look at everything that's happened in the past couple of weeks in totality, don't be surprised if we see a flush to the downside. We are very clearly in some sort of an attack. I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole, but here we are. Let me read this tweet. This comes from a friend of mine and someone who I consider a really good critical thinker in the space. I'm going to show you his tweet, and I'm also going to show you a tweet from Dr. Jeff Ross. Again, another person who hasn't been in Bitcoin for a year or two. They've been here for a long time. So this first tweet comes from Scott Deddles. And he says, and again, this is just a tweet. Don't have to put your tinfoil hats on. But he says, a good false flag event requires real victims that generate a deep fear in the heart of the observer. One that resonates because it's relatable. From there, the feeling is amplified by sleeper agents and the media machine into an orchestrated mechanism to corral the masses. When the panic has really taken hold, questioning the event itself is social bad things. The dialogue instead zeroes in on what went wrong and what could be done to prevent it from happening again. Problem, reaction, solution. Some of your favorite personas in the space have hidden motives and secret assignments. Pay attention to those trying to get you to stare directly at the car crash. Look at the problem. Look at the problem. How crazy is the problem right now? Fear, fear, fear. Buy BlackRock's IBIT. Sell your Bitcoin. Self-custody is dead. Fear, fear, fear. Think of those people. Who are those people? Look at this. This cold card wallet exploit and the urgency of the pending clarity vote seem oddly coordinated to me. Probably just a coincidence that's sending Bitcoiners into a panic to move and centralize their sats, right? Right? Probably just a coincidence. I say this to once again remind you, be incredibly cautious about what you're doing. Do not have all of your eggs in one basket. Jeff Ross did have a pretty wild price prediction that was nowhere near correct. Good point. Again, take everybody's opinion with a grain of salt. Mine included. Don't trust anything I say. Verify it. Anybody who says that you can't challenge their opinions, don't trust them. It's not scientific. Again, just go on Twitter and question the power law. Just ask questions. You'll be attacked. You'll be labeled uneducated. Makes you wonder, why can't I question this? Reminds me of 2020, does it not? Trust the experts. Let's not get myself in too much trouble. All I will say is be very careful. I don't care how scary this hack was from Bitcoin. With cold card losing 1,000 Bitcoin, self-custody is not dead. Self-custody is still the only way that we separate money from state. Otherwise, the suit coiners win. The suit coiners want you to buy their shares and they want to buy your Bitcoin. With all that said, guys, it's Saturday. I hope you have a good weekend. Don't be scared into selling your coins. I'm going to end this one here. I'm going to see you all in the next live stream.